So today we're gonna check out one of those topics that sooner or later every guitar player will have to go through, which is how do we find the names of the notes that we play on the fretboard of the guitar. And more precisely, we're gonna look at how do we find them quickly. Right, so let's start from the basics. The very first thing that you must know is obviously the names of the open strings. Now this might sound obvious, but it's the very first thing that we need to start from as a first reference to figure out the names of all of the other notes that we play on guitar. So we must know that naming them from the top to the bottom, they will be E, A, D, G, B, E, in standard tuning, of course. Now, all of the notes that you play on guitar belong to the chromatic scale. So that is the second thing that you must know. Basically, the chromatic scale is nothing but a scale that contains all of the 12 notes that we find in the Western music system. If I count them from the A string, just because A is the first letter of the alphabet, you will go through the 7 letters of the alphabet A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and in between each letter you will find a note that can be called with either a sharp or a flat note. There are going to be 2 places where you don't find this sharp or flat note, so you just go from one letter to another. That will be between the letters B and C and between the letters E and F. One quick trick that you could use to memorize at first the fact that between B and C and between E and F you don't have any sharp or flat notes is thinking about the word be, like the verb to be or not to be in English, because if you think about B, B, E, those are the places where after the letter B and after the letter E you don't find a sharp note. Okay, so that's just a quick tip. So we were saying if we count them from the A string, we're gonna find open A, of course, but then the first fret is already gonna be called either A sharp or B flat. So basically sharp just means higher than. So A sharp means higher than A. While if I say B flat, flat only means lower than. So if the second fret is gonna be called B, just before that first fret, I can say that's lower than B, so B flat. Now, whether you call it A sharp or B flat, the sound will be exactly the same. And the same will be with all of the other notes with sharp or flats, they all have double names. So again, open string A, first fret, A sharp or B flat, second fret, B. Now, because we are on the note B, and we said before that after the note B we don't have a sharp, the third fret will be called C. Now you continue after that with a C sharp or D flat and then the note D. After that again D sharp on fret 6 or E flat, and on fret 7 the letter E. Now E was the other letter where you didn't have any sharp after it, so you go to fret number 8 and you find the letter F. After that you go to fret number 9, F sharp or G flat, fret number 10, G, fret number 11, G sharp or A flat, and at fret number 12 you're back to the same point, which is the letter A, just one octave higher. Now you might think like, well, if I know the names of the open strings and I also know the chromatic scale and how to count the notes on that string that I'm going to play, basically I can already figure out any note that I want to play on guitar. And this is actually correct. Like if I go here, fret 4 of the B string, if you start from the open string B, you'll be able to count B, C, because we don't have a B sharp, then C sharp or D flat, D, and then on fret 4, D sharp or E flat. So effectively you can figure them out already just knowing these 2 things. But first of all, this sometimes becomes a little too long. For example, if I go to fret number 9 or 10, it might take too long to count all of the notes from the beginning of the fretboard, starting from the open strings. And more importantly, you might expose yourself to more mistakes. So to avoid that, we need a few more references. So let's go over these extra references together. Now, the very first one will sound familiar to most of you. This is a lesson for beginners after all, but I found out that very often, even intermediate and more advanced players benefit a lot from a recap like this. I'm talking about the rule of fret 12. Now, if you own an acoustic or an electric guitar, more likely your acoustic or electric guitar will have two dots on top of the 12th fret to mark the 12th fret. Now, why is that? Because the 12th fret is a very important one on guitar. Basically, the same notes that we mentioned for the open strings that we might think as a fret 0, you will find the same names on fret 12 of each string. So if you know that the third string from the bottom is going to be called G, then even the 12th fret on the G string will be called G, just one octave higher. And this is because the chromatic scale that we talked about earlier contains only 12 notes, and the distance between them is half step or one fret on guitar. So after 12 steps, you'll be back to the same point as the open string, just one octave higher. Now, once you know that the 12th fret is gonna be called exactly like the string that you're playing, you can take it as a reference. And for example, if you have to figure out the name of any note that you play just before the 12th fret or just after the 12th fret, this is especially if you play the electric guitar, you can use that as a reference instead of the open strings and just count those notes using the chromatic scale. Let's make an example. If I go to fret number 9 of the D string, instead of starting from the D string, you know, the open string, and just count D, D sharp, E, F, and so on and so forth until I reach the fret 9 and hoping that I don't make any mistake, I can start from fret 12, which is a D as well, and go backwards. So fret 11, you will find a C sharp or D flat, fret 10, a C, and fret 9, a B. Now, again, this probably is not the quickest way, but definitely this is way quicker than starting from the open string and counting 9 half steps. The same thing happens if you have to figure out the name of any note after the 12th fret, especially in the very first few frets after the 12th. So if I have to figure out the fret 13 on the B string, well, I will just start from fret 12 of the B string, which is a B, of course, and then from here I will move one fret forward, fret 13, which is going to be C. Now, if the examples and the rule about the 12th fret make sense, let's move on to another rule which regards now the 5th fret. Okay. Now, I'm sure that most of you already saw people tuning the guitar or checking the tuning of the guitar doing this kind of thing. Now, why is that? This is because the interval between the open strings is always the same, a perfect fourth, with the exception of these two strings, G and B, which they have a major third. Now, a perfect fourth in music is 5 semitones, so 5 frets on the guitar, with a major third being 4 semitones, so 4 frets. So that means if I place myself on fret 5 of any string, I will have the same note, in the same octave by the way, as the open string below. This is something that you can check with the experience, even just by ear, for example, and you will notice that if you are at fret 5 of the E string, the note that you play is an A, and it sounds exactly like the open A underneath. Same thing on the A string. If you go to fret 5, that will be a D, and it sounds like the open D underneath, and so on. D string, fret 5, is a G, and it sounds like the open G below. Now, if you are on the G string, because there is an interval of a major third between the G and the B, you will have to go to fret number 4 to find the open string, the sound of the B like the open string below, like this. While then back to second and first string, this pair works exactly like the very first pairs that we talked about. So if you go to fret 5 of the B string, that would be the same E as the open high E string at the bottom. Now, how do we use this rule to figure out the other notes? Well, first of all, you can memorize easily the names of all of the frets 5 that you got on guitar and the fret 4 on the G string, just thinking about the open string below. Again, we are just using the knowledge of the names of the open strings that we mentioned at the very beginning of this video, and that's why they are so important. And then you can start from there as a new reference in the middle of the fretboard. So if you think about it, we already had one big reference with the names of the open strings as fret 0 at the beginning, okay, at the beginning of the fretboard. And then we had another reference which we created with the rule of the fret number 12, okay. So we can cover the first few frets easily, thinking about the open strings. the frets just before and just after the fret 12, again, just using the fret 12. But we're gonna have more likely a sort of black hole in the middle of the fretboard. And that black hole goes pretty much between frets 5 and 9, I would say. At least this is what most people experience. So what I would say is, if you do have a reference around fret 5, and that is a strong reference, you can use it to figure out the names of all of the notes just around the fret 5, okay? So if I have to figure out what's it called, the fret 6 on the A string, this note here, I will more likely not think about the open A or the fret 12, because either A is going to be quite far away from the note that I'm looking for. So how can I say immediately that is going to be a D sharp or E flat? Well, because my reference is fret number 5. The fret number 5 is called D, like the open string below. So from there, I just count what's the next step on the chromatic scale. It's going to be D sharp or E flat. And I'm done. Literally in 1 second, I can figure out the name of a note in the middle of the fretboard without thinking about the names of the open strings or the names of the 12 frets. With that in mind, if this makes sense and you are still following, guys, we can use this rule to make one extra rule, which is going to be related to the previous one, and it's going to be the +5 -5 rule. So how does this work? Well, if the fret number 5 of any string is going to be the same as the open string below, with the exception of the G string where you have to go to fret 4, well then, if I continue to the next fret, for example, I go to fret 6 of the low E string, like here, I'm gonna find the same note in the same octave as the string below fret 1. Okay, so again, fret 5 of the E string is gonna be called A, like the open string below, and the open string below is nothing but a fret 0. So if I move to fret 6 of the low E string, that's gonna be like going half step higher even on the string below, so fret 1, and I can check that again with the sound. Okay, and if I continue with fret 7, that's gonna be like fret 2 below. Fret 8 is gonna be like fret 3 below. So basically, now I know that once I know the name of any note on a string, and more likely if you move around the top strings, which are gonna be the low end of the guitar, you learn them a little bit quicker because you use them more to move, for example, bar chords around. What you can say is that if I know that fret number 8 on the low E string is a C, well then I know that underneath on the next string, the A string, I find the C on fret number 3. Or, and this is the interesting thing, the other way around. If you know, for instance, that fret number 3 on the A string is called C, and maybe you know that because you know this chord, which has the root note here, then you can figure out very quickly that just adding 5 frets to fret number 3 and getting fret number 8, you can move to the next string on top and find the same note. Fret 3 on the A string, fret 8 +5 on the string on top. So if you're going down, you do -5. If you go up, you do +5. Again, this is a general rule, guys, so feel free to experiment with different pairs of strings. There is just one exception, as always, between these two strings, the G and the B strings. Even this +5 -5 rule becomes a +4 -4 rule when you go between the G and the B string. So if, for example, you know for any reason that fret number 9 on the G string is called E and you want to figure out where is another E below, on the string below, you will have to do -4 and find fret number 5 of the B string. And obviously the other way around. If you knew this, you could go +4 and get the same note on the string above. Right, I would say that for beginners, this is all you need to know for now, and that's already a lot of material to practice and experiment and ask yourself the names of random notes on the fretboard, which is always the quickest way to learn them, together with questioning yourself about the names of the notes that you play within chords. Okay, like what's it called this, for example, or within scales. If you are practicing, what's the name of all of the notes that I played? If you're practicing the A minor pentatonic, can you already name all of the notes that you were playing? And how quick are you when you name them? So these are the ways you should practice this and get quicker and quicker with the practice. But for a more experienced guitarist, I would like to add a few extra tips that you can use, to figure out the name of any note that you're playing on the fretboard. And well, first of all, one extra tip is use the knowledge of things that you already play. So things that you already play could be different for anybody, but again, let's think about open chords, for example. When we mention the C, if we know why this chord is called C, and it's called C because this is its root note, then we know that this note is a C, okay? And this could be another reference. So next time you have to figure out where is a C sharp on the A string because I need to play a C sharp minor bar chord. Don't start from the open string and go like A sharp, B, C, C sharp. I mean, you can do it, but it's gonna be slower compared to, oh, but I know that this is gonna be a C. Therefore, the next fret is a C sharp. And I can play in no time a C sharp minor. Or think about other chords that you know, like G. This G will have a root note here. So if you're looking again for a G sharp, because you have to play a G sharp minor, start from here, figure out that the next fret is called G sharp and play your G sharp minor bar chord, for example. Now, I made an example with chords, but you could feel more comfortable with scales, or you might feel more comfortable with power chords, especially if you are more of a rock player and you play more electric guitar, then you use the root notes of the power chords that you already know to figure out new references or actual songs. If for some reason you learned a song which contained an E flat minor, okay, or an E flat power chord, then you will remember forever that this note is E flat and you will use it as a new reference when you have to figure out other notes around that. So yeah, the list would be really long and anybody would have a different set of references. But something that I want to show you is the octave displacement. If you know the octave displacement, more likely you'll get better even at practicing stuff like pentatonic scales or any other scale, same for arpeggios on guitar. And this means that you can figure out immediately, starting from a root note, let's say G, where all of the G's on guitar are. So if you know that this is an octave, this is another octave, this is another octave, this is the following octave, this is the following octave, and this is the following octave. Basically, you played all of the G's that you can play on guitar in one octave. So going from this G to the same G, one octave higher on the same string. Now, this is something that I personally suggest to all of my students when they practice stuff like the pentatonic scales. To me, it makes no sense to learn that this is the shape 1 in G minor of the pentatonic scale without knowing that this is the root note, but you also have another root note here and another root note here. Apply this to all of the 5 shapes and you get all of the root notes and therefore all of the octave displacement in the key of G, and you can apply that to any key you want. Now, most people know a portion of this bigger rule that I just mentioned because many people are aware that once you know the name of one note on the E string, you can find the octave of that note, so basically the same note, a G 1 octave higher, just moving 2 strings below and 2 frets forward. And here you go, from fret 3 on the low E string, if I move down to the D string and go 2 frets forward, fret 5 on the D string, I'll find the following G. This is a very helpful rule, and if you don't feel comfortable with octave displacements on guitar yet, feel free to start from here and slowly build up all of the following references. But if instead you already know, for example, all of the 5 shapes of the pentatonic scale, question yourself about where are the root notes and can I use them as new references to figure out the other notes? I can guarantee you guys that if you apply all of these rules slowly with lots of practice, all of the notes that you play on guitar will make instantly sense in terms of names, and it's almost like if any fret that you're gonna play will have a light telling you this is called this way. Right, that's all for this lesson, guys. If you are interested in learning more about music theory and applying this to the guitar, like for example figuring out the names of the notes that you play instantly, feel free to join me on my Friday live streamings here on YouTube. They're called Music Theory for Guitarists. It's basically a series of live streamings that I do every week on YouTube, talking about music theory topics on guitar. I'll leave a link in the description and probably also a card up here where you can watch the previous episodes, and if you feel like it's something you would enjoy, you can join me for free every Friday on YouTube. If you haven't done it yet, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, and feel free to follow me on Instagram as well. Thanks a lot for your support, guys, and for watching this video. This means a lot to me. This was the Bearded Guitarist, and I'll see you next week.